Okay, we're live.
All set? Hi, guys. This is Nicole Leahy with the Deborah Lucci team. We're also here with other agents on the team. We have Mackenzie Cormier, Amanda Perlmutter, Diana Silva, Joanne D., Elisa O'Connell, and Angela Sweeney. So today we are going to be talking to Arthur Pickett. He is with Royal Air Systems, and they're based out of North Reading. And we're going to talk about some HVAC tips and some maintenance. And then we also have some questions for you as well. It's a great topic, especially, buyers now, as they're looking at homes, they have a ton of questions about this. And, we're not the expert here. You are. So, let's begin. So, Arthur, do you want to tell us a little bit about, what you're doing and how long you've been in the business and, get us started?
I've been in the residential HVAC business for well over 20 years. Started in high school. So I've seen quite a bit of houses in the local area and quite a variety of systems. The business itself was started by my father, so I'm the second generation to it. And we're about 42 years old this year. So that's really about it.
How many people are working at your company? How big's your company?
We are currently grand total about 20 people. So we have two different divisions. We have a defined service department and a defined install department. So who you get for installations is more trained on the proper installation of a new piece of equipment and the codes, where your service technicians are more general and are more towards troubleshooting components within the system.
Okay. Now, just to get onto your service department, do you feel that, you should have your central air service once a year? Is that why you have such a big department?
Both your heating and air conditioning should be looked at, if not by you, a professional, at least once a year. Now, depending on the criteria, if you've got, a small house and 12 dogs, then you should be paying attention to your air filter once a month, if not more.
Wow.
If you're an average house with an average system and an average family, you could probably get away with looking at that more like every 6 to 12 months.
Looking at the filter itself or the whole system? The filter?
Well, it all depends on the type of system that you have. But, as a homeowner, that filter is pretty much what you should really be focusing on. As we are a service entity, that is in our scope of work. So when we go in to do a maintenance, that is one of our priorities, is air filters.
And what about, as part of that service call, would that be cleaning out the
air ducts?
The air ducts?
Generally speaking, no. Air duct cleaning is an entity within itself. So it could definitely be part of a diagnosis for a problem.
Okay.
One of the things that we look at is the temperature rise or fall across a product. So that's how it's either getting rid of its BTUs or removing the BTUs out of your airstream. So if the filter is dirty, that's going to impede on that. Or if the ductwork is dirty, one of the service techs would look at the filter and say, well, the filter's clean, but, and our airflow is set properly, but we have quite a big temperature difference between our return and our supply. Are we restricting airflow in other means? So they would look further into it in the distribution system and see if there's an obstruction of some sort, and then talk to you about your options from there.
How often do you recommend that they clean the air ducts?
Probably about every 15 to 20 years.
Oh, okay.
So it is generally not something that you do yearly.
Okay.
And even the 15 to 20 years is more of a blanket statement depending on the house, there's plenty of houses out there that somebody's owned for 40 years and never done it. That's not an issue. They might have very, very minimal dust and debris in their duct system. But depending on the environment and depending on where the ducts are placed, you could definitely have a duct system that is in desperate need of being cleaned after 40 years of somebody living in the environment.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Angela. Go ahead, Joanne.
Arthur, I had a question about what are the challenges you have with installing an air conditioning system in an older or an historic home? And how do you go around that? I know.
So if we were to go to an older home, because that's a much easier question than a historic home.
Yeah.
So let's just say it's an older house within the last, 60, 70 years. Depending on what the customer wants. So that's the first thing. Everything is driven by the homeowner. Mm-hmm. So if the customer doesn't want to see these Mitsubishi things up on the wall, we would talk more about a ducted system. And then depending on what they wanted to do and the size and style of the house. So if you're dealing with an older colonial and they didn't care to give up some closet space, we could run some ducts down through some closets in the corners so we don't lose a lot of closet space, down into the joist space of the first floor ceiling, second floor, and then use that joist space to run the duct, in the center or in the corner of a room. We've been doing that as long as I can remember. Today, we're seeing a lot more people opt to do an attic system in those style houses. So we have a system that just has ductwork in the attic. That handles the second floor. Then we do another system in the basement where that comes up through the floor and that handles the first floor.
So then you have two separate systems, though. Is that correct?
Yes, it would be in most cases.
Is that more cost effective to do it that way?
No, it's more expensive.
So if space is limited, because I know we all take buyers out and, the spring market's already started and, we're going into houses that do not have the space to accommodate a large system. Do you do the Mitsubishi systems?
Yes, we do.
So that, okay. And that would be typical in possibly a ranch or a home with just limited space.
So I've done Mitsubishis in houses that are multi-levels, ranches, and everything in between. It really depends on what the customer wants to see.
Okay.
I'm starting to see some, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Mitsubishi systems that are such so many people feel are an eyesore, hanging on the wall. But I've seen some that are actually coming through the ceiling, mm-hmm. and actually some that are set underneath the window. So it almost looks like a radiator with a radiator cover. Is that correct?
So you've got a variety in the Mitsubishi world. You can go to what everybody, the iconic ductless unit, which is the wall mount unit.
Yeah.
And that is kind of where everybody's mind gravitates to when they think of ductless. They have what they deem a floor mount unit, which goes underneath the window. And to me, it looks very similar to a hotel room heating and air conditioning system.
Right.
But they've broadened that scope out even more, where you can get one that does not have any cabinetry on it. So when I get it out of the box, it is a galvanized steel box, and I work with the cabinet maker or general contractor, and they can build that into a cabinet or a built-in or a window seat, and that is one way to get around it. And depending on the house, we've done a lot of multiple types of systems. where we'll have a conventional wall mount unit in a playroom for the kids. But then Mitsubishi even makes a ducted model. So we'll go more conventional with a ducted system in an attic and put conventional registers in the ceiling. So it looks like it's a more normal installation. And then for, like an offshoot, we've got a family room in the back or a dining room in the back where they don't want to see the ductwork. They don't mind registers. We can do a smaller ducted unit where it just has a single return, single supply underneath the room with just those two on the floor. So it's really driven by the homeowner and what they want to see. It's not one thing fits every home. So every job feels like it's a custom build.
Can I just ask
Really
one
do
more
it all.
question, just to follow up on my original question? What about historic homes?
So you get into where can we put the outdoor equipment to appease the historic society? So it really depends on that town's historical society. And then yet again, what can we do in the house so we don't offend the nature of the house? So the ductless systems are not really used a lot in those type, because we're going to make a penetration through the sidewall of the house, and you're going to see what they call slim duct, which is that product that we hide the line set on the outside of the house with. So we tend to gravitate more towards doing a conventional ducted system. A lot of those older houses have older gravity based ducts, or the old style registers with a slate around them. So we'll use those existing holes and registers for the most part to put a more normal air conditioning heating system into that style house. But yet again, it's a case by case basis to the town we're in and what they'll accept and what the customer will accept.
Arthur, can you give us an example of like how much it would potentially cost for like a home buyer to put in like, central air with ductwork? I feel like that's a question that so many of my buyers have. I know it obviously depends on, the size of the house, but even if we could just do an example of like a 2,800 square foot house and the cost difference between like doing a mini split versus central air with the ductwork.
So if you're going to do one room with a ductless unit, or a room, like a larger family room with a ductless unit that was sized to give you some overflow, you're probably going to really be in that $8,000 to $10,000 mark. If you're going to do that smaller room that isn't that large, more like an office, or what I consider to be a more conventional room, a 10 by 10, 12 by 12,
Yep.
You're probably going to be closer to that $4,000 mark. That's going to handle just that room with not much overflow. That $8,000 to $10,000 mark is more like you saw in the ranches in the 80s, where they put that big giant unit, that through the wall unit in the family room, and they would hope it would cool off the bedrooms enough as the day progressed. Not the most ideal way of doing things, but it's definitely done today. Doing a ducted system, yet again, it depends on the style of house. A colonial is going to cost more than doing a ranch. So if we were to do a conventional ranch, you're probably going to be somewhere with half decent equipment, 12 to 14,000. Depending on what town and what rebates you could get, you could probably get it a little bit lower than that. If we were to go more towards a colonial, you're probably looking at closer to 20 to 25.
Because you have to do the two separate systems.
Yep.
But
Or
in the end,
no, really the two separate floors. There's a lot more ductwork that's going to go into a colonial than it is going to go into a ranch.
Right, but the key to that is, in the end, I would assume anyway, it's going to be more cost effective on their bills with they have two separate systems and don't need to, necessarily cool the whole house during the day if they're downstairs, vice versa.
There's an argument to be had for shutting down a system. If it's 95 or above and you're shutting down the system,
Yep.
You're spending more money than if you just set the thermostat at what you wanted it to be and walked away from it.
Yeah, I have been told that, but just at least maybe.
If it was 80 degrees,
Mm-hmm.
you'd be more apt to make the argument that would be cost effective. But it would still take quite a bit of time. These systems are not designed to overcome that much temperature difference in a short period of time. So if you walk into a house and it's a high outside air temperature and it's also high inside the house and you start the system, it might not be until the next morning by the time that thermostat sees that temperature you want it to be.
What are your thoughts on smart thermostats?
A lot of people want them. I think if they're done properly, meaning that you run enough wires to put it in without thinking outside the box, they're not a bad thing. I see a lot of stuff on the market which scares me because I see a lot of it burn out, and that will leave you without heat or without air conditioning when you want it. And it's packaged very pretty, so everybody thinks it's a professional way of doing things, but it is definitely not to code, and it really shouldn't be done. So you see things from major manufacturers out there that deceive the system into operating the way that they've designed it to. But if you look in electrical code, it is not really something that you should be putting in. So if the system is set up for it, it can be an asset. If it is being done jury-rigged, I wouldn't do it. And yet again, we get back to that whole thing is if it's really an extreme temperature day, doing setback from your telephone remotely or doing setback at your home on the thermostat itself, it might not be a good idea for you. So there might not be much savings there. If you are somebody that travels a lot, especially for work where you find yourself all over the place, it is an asset and a half, because when you're about to come home, you can turn that thermostat on, and when you land at Logan and drive home, your house is at your temperature. And it will also give you the ability to monitor your house. A lot of them will allow you to set up a lowest point, so it'll send you an alert on your telephone if it hits 55 in your house. So if it's really cold out, you already have a heads up that your system's down, and you can call up your heating and air conditioning guy and they can run out. And hopefully you have a smart doorknob at that point too, and you can let me in and I can fix the heat.
So it's now that it's winter time, and we have a lot of buyers. Like I said, the spring market's already started and we're bringing buyers out, and a lot of the homes that we're taking them into already have the central air system in place.
Mm-hmm.
But since we can't turn on the central air in the cold weather, what are some things that they should be looking for?
Age.
Great.
Yeah.
First thing that comes to mind is age. These things aren't meant to last 30 years. And the younger they are, so the newer products are really being designed to fail sooner.
I've heard that. So are you talking about the outside condensers?
Yeah, well, both components. A lot of the times, you you're matching the equipment. So that outdoor unit matches the indoor section. So
Is there an advantage to keep the outdoor condensers covered in the winter?
Generally speaking, I think it's more of a disadvantage.
Okay.
Every spring we see a lot of mice damage.
Okay.
So if you make that a very watertight and comfortable windproof area, you're saying to all the mice in the neighborhood, here's your hotel.
Oh.
Okay. So we had one, this is a twofer. We had one the other night that called in. The smart thermostat went down. The way that they had it wired, it was utilizing one of the wires for the air conditioner to use the power to power up the thermostat. And when the mouse chewed through that wire, not only are they not going to have air conditioning in the spring, but now they didn't have heat in the middle of winter.
Ooh, okay. All right, so that's good.
Yet again, it's all more for doing things properly as opposed to, doing it the way that some people say it can be done. And they sure enough had that outdoor unit wrapped up tight with a blue top from, the hardware store and a whole bunch of twine. So we disconnected the air conditioning and said, in the spring, we're going to need to get back out here because there's definitely mice chewing up those wires.
What do you think the average? You said they're not meant to last 30 years. So what would you say the average would be?
ASHRAE, which is the people that write the book on life expectancy and proper ways to doing things, are stating that most equipment is going to last you 10 to 15 years.
Interior and exterior equipment.
Yep.
Understood. Thank you.
With that said, some of, not all of, but when you buy a higher end product, they're going to last you a little bit longer than the lower end stuff. We definitely see that.
What products do you use? Certain products?
So yeah, we are predominantly Mitsubishi and Trane are our two products. But even within those lines, so it's not just saying, okay, Toyota's the best car. That's a broad statement because you can buy a Corolla, you can buy an Avalon, you can buy a Highlander. There's multiple different models. So they're not all the best for everybody. So if you buy the more inexpensive economy air conditioner, just like the more inexpensive economy car, it might not last you or get you all the benefits that the high-end one is going to give you.
Thank you.
Is there something to be said, Arthur, about that 40-year-old boiler in the basement when you go look at a house that's still fully functioning, or does that need to go?
I have one.
That's a conversation.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah.
No, you can ask for yourself. I walked in on a customer of mine the other day, and we had a long conversation, because he was all, well, we should go get the biggest and best and, tear this old thing out. And it was a 30-year-old Burnham boiler, and it wasn't in bad shape. It's 80% efficient, and I'll get to efficiency in a second. But there's nothing to it. There is very little electronics. It's very, very simple. And I said to him, it'll probably last you another 30 years. But if we go put in this brand new thing, how long is that going to last them? Probably 10 to 15 years. So what's going to be the payback? Why are we going to do this upgrade? And that's, in a lot of instances, a hard sell for me. You're going to have a pretty big heating bill for a 10% savings to really pay for it in 10 years. So I would take it on a case-by-case basis and a person-by-person basis, because some people's goals are they want everything to be as efficient as possible. I much rather have everything as reliable as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because I live in New England. I've born and raised in North Reading. I've seen all the winters that most of you have seen. So it was 2 degrees when I woke up this morning. I didn't really care about efficiency. I cared that the system was working. And yet again, those higher efficiency products do become more finicky. So the more refined that product can be, when it gets out of its tolerance, it can throw a lot of problems. Where the older stuff was just built to burn fuel and put out heat.
And just keep that yearly maintenance going and let it ride out until it can't go anymore.
Make sure that it's hard to beat an old chunk of cast iron. You know, it's hard to rot that away when that 40-year-old machine is made out of 3/8 cast metal, as opposed to, you know, 1/8 of an inch aluminum.
Good point.
You know,
They don't like them like they used to.
No,
That's the
excellent
same thing
information.
about my cell phones.
but you ask a lot more of your cell phone than you did 20 years ago.
Yeah, I just ask it not to die every 2 years. That's all I ask.
Yet again, we get into that planned obsolescence.
Bring back the wall phone with the dial.
Geez, Angela. Well, this was great, Arthur. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions?
I don't think so. He answered all of mine and more.
Everything.
Yeah, that
These are
was
typical
awesome.
questions we get from buyers all the time. Very helpful, even for us as homeowners.
Exactly. Yeah. Nicole,
So,
looking at you.
I know.
I would also say if somebody's going to buy a new house, and you know, if the new house to them, if everything's under 10 years old, they're probably in pretty safe condition. But if everything is outdated and 40 to 50-year-old equipment, yeah, they're going to have some problems. But I have a feeling your price point is going to be affected if you have that old house that has everything brand new. It's going to be a higher price. So know what you're getting into.
Right.
One last question before you go. When you have someone come out and service your furnace and just do your yearly tune-up.
Yep.
Just what's it for? Just a yearly. What's the cost just to do a yearly tune-up? And how do you have to get on the books? Schedule so far in advance? Are you that backed up?
It all depends on the year. The past 2 years have been a little weird, obviously. Historically, I would say people start looking at doing their maintenances in September.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if you are an oil customer as opposed to a natural gas customer, oil really needs to be serviced once a year. That's a big cleaning, where you take a lot more apart on an oil system than you do with a gas system. So it is more important to do that oil system by the calendar year, so every 12 months. So whether you do it in December or you do it in October, just make sure the next year you're doing it in December if you did it in December this year. Gas is a lot more forgiving. So as long as you get it looked at, my big thing, and most of my guys are on all of the heating equipment, are pretty hung up on combustion efficiency. So we want to make sure that it's burning properly. Now that is one for efficiency, and we get a good clean burn with the system. That's two, to keep the life up of the system. And lastly, it's to make sure that that's not burning so poorly that if something were to go wrong, it's going to hurt somebody. So we're looking at how it burns and what it's making for carbon monoxide. So if that's not burning properly, even that flue gas that's going outside of the house can make it an unsafe environment. So you want to pay close attention to that with a fossil fuel burning appliance. If it is an air source heat pump, that's another thing that none of you have asked me about today. The biggest thing that we've seen change in the industry, even in the Northeast, is the usage of heat pumps. A lot of people, including us, because we sell a lot of them every single year, and we're doing a lot more dual fuel hybrid heating systems. So if you have that oil or gas heating system, it comes time to replace that air conditioning system. Instead of just going to a conventional air conditioning system, we're putting in heat pumps. Mass Save will give you even more money back because you're making the house more efficient for heating use than just air conditioning use. So half of the time we're running that heat pump to heat the house, and when it gets too cold for that to be effective and efficient, it shuts off automatically and switches over to the old fossil fuel, and it bounces back and forth as needed. That is a very, very common thing to do. I would say we probably do it at least twice a week, if not more, where we're converting a house to that type of system.
Definitely seeing more of that out there.
And that's really where Mitsubishi got their foot in the door, was putting those wall-mounted heat pump systems in. So not only did you get air conditioning, but you got heat into a room that didn't have it before. So that kind of opened up all of our eyes to, hey, why aren't we doing it this way? So you can have a conventional attic air conditioning system with a boiler in the basement, and we can tie both of those together. So we use that attic duct system to heat the house down to 35 degrees, and then once it hits 35 degrees, the system says, okay, put the boiler on duty now and run the boiler, and the baseboard picks up the rest of that season.
Interesting.
So that's
Very informative.
That's something that we're seeing more and more and more every single day. Anything else?
That's it. I don't think
I
so.
think you
Thank
covered
you.
everything.
Thank you very much, Arthur. Very helpful.
Thank you so much,
Very
Arthur.
I know.
informative.
Thank you so much, Arthur. That was great.
Well, thanks for having me, and call us if you need us.
You'll
Yeah.
be hearing from us, I'm sure. Thank you so much.
Thank
Have
you.
a
Thank
wonderful day.
you.
You too.
Bye-bye.